Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. So it is always so nice to visit Connection Works and to visit with your classes. I'm at St. Malachy's all the time, and it's a treat to get out and to come and to talk about one of my favorite things. Today we're going to be talking about workplace etiquette, and specifically we're talking about civility in the workplace and what is civility. And I find it is something that is so important to every aspect of our life, but at the same time, it's very difficult to define and to put our fingers on. This is about being the person that is making that impression, that is that person who is present at any event or is present in any situation, that is the person that you want your employees, your clients, your investors, you want to be that person that they see. Okay? So we're going to talk about it in the context of going to work. I talk about a lot with co-op students, and it's one thing to do your job, it's one thing to do the tasks that the boss, your supervisor sets out for you, but there's something else also about making that impression and being a certain person, okay? And it's just kind of upping your game a little bit and giving you that edge that we talked about the other day, about that edge, about that being that person that, you know, that person wants to invest in, whether it's in you as a person or in your businesses, your ideas. So I've set this up as 10 points of workplace civility. And each one is opened by a cartoon. I don't know if you can read from where you are. The print is kind of small, so I will read it. And this says, civility in the workplace. And it's Henderson will now bumble his way through yet another boring lecture. So the supervisor, the boss, is not necessarily being his most civil at that time. So workplace civility, it is more than just good manners. It is behavior that preserves the norms for mutual respect. It is demonstrated through manners, courtesy, politeness, and awareness of others' rights and feelings. So it goes beyond just please and thank you, but at the same time, please and thank you figures into it very importantly as well. We'll talk about it. So, funny, we were talking about the phone before we started. So this one it says, so let me repeat this, nobody touches their smartphones during the meeting. Phones have become such an important part of our world. We use them all the time. We all use them all the time. But they've also become a distraction in the world as well. And we have to be careful of what message we're sending when we are actually using the phone in different settings. We need to pay attention. So we need to be able to put the cell phone away when our attention is supposed to be on the task at hand, whether it's on who is speaking to us or whether it's on the job that is set out for us. Okay? I always tell a story that a family member of mine working as a supervisor in a Crown corporation had an employee who was working for him, is in his department, and we were talking about this one day, and he said, I told this person time and time again to put the cell phone away, that texting on the job was not acceptable. And he said, it didn't matter how many times I told him, he said, it just wouldn't pay attention to me. And ultimately, the young man lost his position. Okay, even despite, it's not a suggestion. You really have to be aware of how your phone impacts you. And I know it's so tempting that when we hear that ding or we feel that buzz, you want to know who's texting. You really do have to put it away. And limit personal conversations, understanding that when you are on someone else's clock, that, just a minute, I have to take this phone call, just doesn't cut it. In an emergency situation, that's different. But you just can't, say, this is just my personal time. I'll step away from my work for a few minutes and take care of it. It doesn't always work into it, so just be aware of that. Second point, this is at the help desk. Susan, if you can see the sign on her desk, it says, get lost. And the boss is saying, Susan, we insist you go on a customer service relationship course. Susan's kind of forgotten the manners. She's forgotten her manners. So this is where I am talking about manners. Please, thank you, excuse me, and I'm sorry. And it's not just about please and thank you and I'm sorry. It's about acknowledgement of the people around us and respect for their feelings and respect for their work. Okay, so those simple manners go a long way, but it's respecting what they're doing. And we're treating our coworkers, superiors, clients, and the public with respect. So important. And don't hesitate to acknowledge mistakes. That's where the I'm sorry comes in, or acknowledgement that you have made a mistake. I cannot explain to you how important it is to acknowledge that if you have screwed up in some way, own it. Okay? You are going to get much further ahead by owning your mistake than trying to deny it or hide it or to blame it on someone else. Okay? I can't express that enough. We all make mistakes. We're all human. We all have to acknowledge that. Someone's going to want to invest in you as a person or a business owner, as an employee, when they understand what kind of person you are. It goes a long, long way. This one says, sorry, I only do traditional handshakes. And I know, and he's kind of fist pump there. Customer service hotline, it's casual Friday. Mind if I call you dude? So a little bit more casual perhaps than what we are expecting in terms of a greeting. So this is how we interact with people. This is how addressing people correctly and with courtesy. So we always shake hands. Makes a good impression. Probably you've already talked about how when you're greeting someone, a nice firm handshake. Think about when you are meeting someone for the first time, you are making a first impression. And everything that you bring into the room is making that first impression. So that nice firm handshake, rather than kind of a limp, that just communicates so much. That's what we call nonverbal communication. Okay, everything that we're taking in, I'm in the room, you're looking at me, I'm sending nonverbal messages to you, you're sending nonverbal messages to me. Okay, we are constantly accessing information and kind of processing it. So that nice firm handshake when we meet someone says a lot about who we are. Stand when being introduced. Micheline, you probably would relate to this, is sometimes there's different expectations for women in the past. I think that now that we are equal in the workplace, and always remember that, so that when we meet someone, we stand up to meet them and we shake hands. Kind of we set aside those old-fashioned views about men and women. Okay, we're equals in the workplace, of course. Say hello and goodbye. I always tell this story. I had students, and I had a family of students, and I noticed, this was years ago when I was in the classroom more, I always noticed that this family of students, they always said hello, and they always said goodbye to me when they left the classroom. And I remember that so clearly, and I always appreciated that they acknowledged me when they came in, and they acknowledged me as they left, as their teacher. It meant so much to me that they acknowledged that. Sometimes they even said thank you if it was a especially good lesson for the day. But you have no idea when we treat people with courtesy what kind of impression that we are making to them. Okay? It really formed my ideas about this family. They're brothers and sisters. It was a good-sized family, and it really formed my impression of what kind of people that they were. Something as simple as that. So think about that. Eye contact when speaking with someone. In our society, it is pretty understood that when we're talking with someone, we try to establish eye contact. Be aware there are different cultures, however, that may not. And so we also have to be aware of cultural differences. Using Mr., Mrs., and Ms. when appropriate. Now, sometimes I find people are a little unsure as to how you address people. It usually comes with women. How do we address a woman? How do we know if she's married or not married? The default is always to go to Ms. Okay, that is neutral. And I would say being aware that Miss is typically what we would use for a younger woman. Typically, Miss has been someone who is not married. But if we don't know, we don't make assumptions about their marital status or even their preference for that term. So we would say Ms. is typically a default. When we get to know them, we may know that they prefer Mrs. I go by Ms., and I go by Ms. because when I was married, I kept my maiden name. My my original name, my birth name. So I prefer to go by Ms. Mrs. Kraft is my mom, so I'm Ms. Kraft. But if someone called me, Mrs., it wouldn't really bother me around the school. But if I was calling a parent at home, I would never make any assumptions about that, and I would always refer to them as Ms. And the gentleman, it's easy. We refer to everyone as Mr. But, qualification there, qualifier, we also can't make any assumptions about what gender preference people have. So if we're unsure about what pronouns someone prefers, do you know what I mean by pronoun? So instead of him or her, the person may prefer they, them, or their. Yeah. So I think in most cases that we're safe to ask what pronoun they prefer. Okay? If we're not sure, perhaps they haven't been addressed as such. Sometimes we can just really tell. Sometimes people just appear cisgender female or cisgender male. That means they appear as what they are. But we can't make assumptions. And we're a diverse world, and we have to remember that. Okay, and this one would be my personal pet peeve is avoid dear, honey, and nicknames. Okay? Anybody else go into a business and someone calls you dear or honey? Does that drive you crazy? Okay. Yes. Does bothers you, Mr. Van Beek? I hate it. Okay, so we were talking about this the other day. I just assume that everybody dislikes it. Not everybody cares. But here's the thing. This is what we're talking about. If of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us in the room, 4 of us said yes, it drives us crazy. So what's the best way to treat this? Don't do it. Because especially as business owners, you don't want to risk offending 50% of your clients, right? So when you're in the workplace, if you're, sometimes we scramble with how to address people. I would encourage you to avoid things like dear, honey, hun, sweetie, okay? Not always welcome, okay? Also, even with our coworkers, we would want to be very careful if we were using nicknames. We'd have to know that it was welcome. We don't want to have the opportunity to offend someone. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry, I've still got my raising kids head on. Let me just switch to my working head. Okay? So this is about, who are we when we come to work and what is it that we're saying when we're in our workplace? Think before you speak. Humor contributes to a healthy workplace. Ensure it is respectful and welcomed by all. We always love someone who has a good sense of humor. I think that we all can relate to that. Then when we have a coworker and they're a bit of a jokester or they always have just the right zinger, at the right time, the right place, it's always appreciated. But we have to make sure that it is appreciated. Okay? We have to make sure that our humor is always appropriate and welcome to everyone. Okay? Be sure to be taken seriously. If we joke around too much, what happens then is that we may not be being taken seriously. Is our supervisor or our potential investor or our client, are they looking at us and thinking, not really sure about how seriously this person is taking, my business or my investment in their endeavor? So we want to make sure that it's always at just that right level. And be cautious about how much you share of your personal life. My goodness, when we go into work, we make friends at work. We become sometimes very close with the people that we work with. As adults, that's often the time and the place where we establish those friendships. But we have to be careful that we don't allow our personal lives to interfere with what we're doing in our professional lives. In the cartoon, she said, I've got to take my raising kids head off and put on my working head. That's the right way to do it. That's where we are one person in our personal life, but when we go to work, we're there and we're prepared to actually perform and do what we need to do. All right? We don't want the two interfering with one another. Johnson, I think you misunderstood our Casual Fridays dress code. Okay, so Johnson has really missed the mark on Casual Fridays. Take care of yourself. This is about how you appear. Okay, we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and that we come to our workplace and we're adhering to company dress codes. Sometimes we can push those limits a little bit, but remember, what message are we sending to the people around us if we're pushing those limits? If you're showing up to work in a pair of jeans and you really know that, you know, your employer doesn't love the idea of you wearing jeans every day, maybe you're not going to get fired, but are you making that impression? Are you getting that edge that you want to make sure that you are that person that your company or your supervisor is going to invest in? So think about that. Attend to personal hygiene, clean body and clean clothes. Even when we work in a place where we're going to get dirty, a person should always be showing up to work clean, having had a shower. It's amazing sometimes that people who work in an environment where they do get dirty, that they let their personal hygiene slide. And it's one thing to get, you know, good clean dirt. All right, that sounds crazy. It's one thing to get dirty while we're working, but it's very different to show up and perhaps not having had a shower and essentially kind of being smelly, right? It's difficult to connect with people. Human relationships are complicated. If someone has that barrier, in addition to other ones that may be in place, it's just one more thing to overcome. So always showing up your best self. Seek help for personal issues. Things happen in our lives. Life gets complicated. Family, friends, money, someday children, relationships, loved ones, whatever's happening, mental health, whatever is happening, be aware that your employer is interested in you as a person. Sometimes when we work in a big organization, there's support then in place. We can approach our employer for assistance. But if we work in a small environment, it may be where we actually have to just speak with our boss one-on-one and explain what is happening. Don't allow it to get out of hand and impact your performance without sitting down and sharing it. You know, it's not always an excuse for poor performance at work, but at the same time, we can bring those people in. They want to make an investment in us, okay? And we want to give them the opportunity to do that. Being stressed and busy is not an excuse for poor workplace manners. Okay, so the next point. Take that down or I'll thump you. Outlaw workplace bullying is actually the poster this poor fellow's trying to put up, and the bully is giving him a hard time. So this is very interesting because this is about responding and reacting to our coworkers and information that's given to us from our supervisors and our clients. We really have to understand our own triggers. Sometimes, you know, we go to work and it's been a rough night, you know, with perhaps something going on with our families, or, you know, as people have children and, you know, young children up all night and things like that. And we go in and sometimes we're not 100%. We're not our best. But we really have to remember and work hard. And like I said, leaving that other stuff behind. But there's also a part of us that also we have our own little triggers for different behaviors. And sometimes we really have to take a step back and be careful about how we react when something happens. And I always have a little story that I will tell. Is a behavior intended to offend? Take a minute before responding to examine your own feelings about what is happening. So I always have the story, and I always think it's so a perfect example of this. So this is actually a situation where, in fact, the behavior okay, I'll go back and I'll tell you. So I was a young teacher, and I was teaching at St. Malachy's, and you people wouldn't know because you're not St. Malachy's students, but at St. Malachy's, we used to operate at the St. Malachy's building, and then we used to have classes in the St. Vincent's building. After our expansion, all the classes moved back to St. Malachy's. So I was teaching an outdoor pursuits class, and I had this lovely group of students who would come down every day, and they would come into my classroom, and you know, you'd always have that couple minutes where you could just chat, you know, before you got started. And this group was coming from another class. And I was teaching outdoor pursuits, a physical education class, and they were coming from one of the more core courses. I'll leave it at that. And they were coming down, and they started telling me stories about the teachers, making kind of comments about, oh, you're all headed to outdoor pursuits, and oh gosh, you know, what do you do there? And maybe I could use a break. I'll teach outdoor pursuits instead of my subject. And multiple comments. So I let the first go, and then finally, whatever the comment was that I thought, enough is enough, I'm going to respond to this. And in hindsight, those comments were inappropriate. So as a young teacher, I was so upset that day, so I got in my car and I drove up to the St. Malachy's building, and I marched in there, and I was mad. I was very angry at this point, and I marched in there. Now, you should know this, is that I'm a crier, all right? If I get upset, if I'm angry, I cry. If I'm happy, I cry. I'm a crier. It's my kind of go-to response to things. So inevitably, had I reached this teacher that I needed to speak to, I probably would have cried, and that wouldn't have looked good. I was a young teacher. You don't need to go in and be all, teary-eyed. So I got to the building, and this teacher was gone for the day. And so I was angry, and I thought, oh gosh, I really wanted to talk to this person, and I was all fired up. So I had to go home, and I had to wait till the next day. Well, what do you think happened the next day? Shane?
You probably calmed down.
I did.
No,
I did say something. Oh, I did. Yeah, I absolutely did. But I was calm, okay? So I waited until the end of the next day, and I went to see this teacher, and I certainly made all the points that I wanted to make. But what happened is I was calm, and I had calmed down, and I made my points in a professional manner, and I said that I felt that the comments that were made were unprofessional and perhaps even unethical. And I delivered it very calmly, and what the person said back to me said, "You're right, and I apologize, and I will never ever say something like that again, and thank you for speaking with me." So it was a very different exchange than had I shown up and been all fired up and, probably cried, and, so I calmed down. Now, I can't say that I planned that, but it did happen that way. So my point is that taking the time, calming down, taking the deep breath, and just not going out and reacting to things will serve you better in the end. And the way that we express ourselves is we respond appropriately, and we avoid that passive-aggressive. We don't, do things kind of nasty to try to get the person to realize we're upset. We have to state clearly, I am upset. I'm unhappy because of this. And we have to state it clearly. And it's okay to be very direct. It's just the way that we deliver it. We don't deliver it aggressively or try to get the point across. Has anyone ever thought someone in their life was upset and we asked them how they were doing and they just said, I'm fine. Yeah. So we know they're upset, but they won't tell us why. And then the communication breaks down. And it happens. And that's where we're developing that assertive behavior. I students, we express how we feel. We don't say you're wrong, you did this. We say, I feel this way when this happens.
Then you're attacking them.
Right, because when people hear that then they kind of get defensive, and then the communication breaks down. It's hard to remember, hard to do. Bradley takes cyberloafing to a whole new level. Bradley's in his cubicle there and kicked back with his popcorn. We have to use email and social media responsibly. This is very important, and it's becoming even more and more important in our world. We have to be very careful. We have to follow company guidelines. That goes back to the cell phone use as well that we were discussing earlier. We have to be careful how we use email. We have to be careful how we use the actual hardware. Okay? Mr. Van Beek and I sign off on our use of our provincial computers, that our computers belong to the province. We're teachers, and we use them. We sign off on how we use that hardware and how we use the programming. We can't use it for our own personal things. Now, if I send an email to a friend off my work email, no one's going to get uptight about that. But if I decide to run a business off of my computer, that's not allowed. And we sign off on that, and that is actually cause for being sanctioned, or perhaps after warnings, it could even be a reason to be let go. I would encourage you to conduct sensitive exchanges face-to-face. How many people here have been into a text back and forth with someone, a friend or a family member, and you find yourself having to say, no, I didn't mean this, I meant that. Punctuation is key, right? Eat, shoots, and leaves. Yeah. So You have to be very careful because oftentimes we don't convey tone when we're texting. So if we want, it's hard, isn't it? So conducting that conversation face to face, we get so much more out of it, and it's so much clearer. And remember that when we put things in emails and texting, it's there forever, and we want to be careful about what we're saying. Not that you're going to say anything inappropriate, but you wouldn't want it to be misunderstood as well. Avoid social media at work and sharing work-related events on social media unless it's part of the job. So sometimes businesses want materials shared because it's advertising, it's marketing. They want their company image out there. But if a company has a certain image and you're sharing aspects on social media that perhaps don't adhere to that company's image or what their mission statement is, you can find yourself in some hot water because of that. So be very careful. Rule of thumb, don't share things on social media related to work unless it's part of your job. I think that is the wisest thing to do. You don't want to be standing on the spot and, in front of your supervisor trying to defend why you put images up of something at work without you being asked or directed to do that. So very, very careful. And beware of what you share. Everything that you put out there is out there forever. You've been hearing that since middle school. Mr. Van Beek.
I don't know if you're going to mention it later, but you had a good point you made one time about imagining everything you put up on social media is going to find
That's in the end, I'll talk, at the end, it's a good one. Define normal. So just that, define normal. Be inclusive. We live in a very, very diverse world, and we have to respect and accept that diversity in all aspects of our life. And when we're at work, we have to be inclusive and take care of the people around us. Again, that is you as the person at work, and that is the person that your supervisor, your organization is going to want to invest in. That gives you that edge. When you are that person that understands that people are different and you accept and embrace everyone and that you work well with everyone, regardless of their diversity, that will serve you well. Include coworkers in conversations, lunches, and get-togethers. Your presence at work extends beyond the professional side of it, but also to those off-duty times. It extends to the lunchroom. It extends to those Friday night after work get-togethers. Okay? Include everyone. Follow the kindergarten rules of sharing. Okay? My mom was a kindergarten teacher, and I think I always go back to that. What was the kindergarten rule of sharing? Sharing is caring. And if you bring something to share, what do you have to make sure of? There's enough for everyone. Exactly. You guys know this. The golden rule, all those things. Your ideas are outstanding, Beresford. I'm glad I thought of them. So when we work hard, and we bring a lot of ourselves to our workplace. We put a lot of energy into it. A lot of ourselves goes into it. We don't like it when someone takes credit for our work. We have to, when we have that right to expect that, we also have that responsibility is that we are not taking credit for someone else's as well. That is just, that's a golden rule at work. Be generous with praise for your coworkers' accomplishments. It feels good to have our hard work acknowledged, doesn't it? Even from the person sitting beside us, Go that extra step. Say, that was really great the way that you handled that. Good work in there. I wish I could, respond to clients the way you can. Wish I could do a pitch as well as you can. Maybe you can give me some pointers. People want to share. People want to help. Acknowledge their hard work. And let your own work speak for itself. Number 10, this is our holiday office party. It's still better than last year. So they've got McDonald's. And I'm not putting down McDonald's. I do certainly enjoy a McDonald's visit once in a while myself. But is that what we expect for the Christmas party? Be a positive influence. Like I've already said, it goes beyond just the task that you are being assigned to do. You are a person in that organization. You can contribute to it positively. So if you want to make sure there's a great holiday party coming up, join the social committee. Be that person at work. Address situations when they arise, gossip and inappropriate joking. You know, it's hard to stand up to someone and say, I'm not okay with that. You know what, that kind of joking or that those comments, those names, you know what, you can just say, I'm not okay with that. Okay, that'll get the message across. Sometimes it's hard, but never, ever, ever join in. Okay? Get involved, those volunteer opportunities in the social committee and etc. Because it kind of, you know, work is so much a part of our lives. We go to school for 13 years, but when we look at our work life, you know, it extends, you know, can be 30 plus years. So we want it to be a positive part of our lives. People forget that they are not only hired to do a good job at their assigned tasks, but to be a positive influence on the team they work with. This is also an important part of what they are being paid to do. So you are paid to do a job, but you are paid to be that person on the team as well. When I talked about civility in the workplace with a friend who's manager of a human resources department, someone who is responsible for hiring and unfortunately sometimes firing people from their positions if it doesn't work out, it's sometimes very elusive to understand that it's not just the tasks. It's about being that team player as well. And if you understand that there's more than just the job part of it, there's that presence of you and the workplace, I think that will serve you well. And the last point, which I've added, is that social media component. We alluded to it before. It's about keeping life and work separate. Ask before tagging. Make sure that you don't tag somebody in anything without asking their permission. When you are applying for a position or when you have an investor who's going to put money into your company, what do you think one of the very first things is that they're going to do? Check on social media. They're going to Google you. When you meet someone new, how many here have ever Googled somebody they met? Yeah, of course. We want to know what their presence is out there in the online world. Potential employers Google potential employees. Pretty much every time, apparently. Okay, I'm at the stage where I'm not applying for jobs, but in kind of researching this, that was my question. And everyone that I talk to in terms of hiring new people, they Google them. Okay, so important. Don't tag anybody else without asking their permission as well. We want to be able to trust that we can do something and that our friends aren't then sharing images of ourselves out there, so we behave in kind. Keep it clean and use humor appropriately. Remember, everything that's out there stays out there. Avoid aggressive online debate or offensive posts. You could be actually reading something on CBC. If you decide that you're going to get into an argument in the comments section with someone, okay, it's out there. So is that the place for you to be, putting, maybe you feel that there's been some injustice, that somebody's made some comment. Is that the place for you to actually dispute it? Is that effective use of your energy? Or is that just putting out kind of an image of you that may or may not be appropriate or accurate? So be careful of that. Build a legacy for the future. Your online presence should inspire pride, not regret. So if you think about it like that, everything that you put out online, if you think about it down the road, you should be able to look back on it and say, I'm proud of my online presence, or not, gosh, I wish I hadn't done that. And if you have done things, maybe you can move forward and say, I want to make sure that my online presence is better. What Mr. Van Beek was referring to earlier when he mentioned it, I had a police officer do a presentation at St. Malachy's one day, and in the course of the presentation, we were talking about employment, and he was talking to students about how to become police officers. And, when we put someone in that kind of position in our society, that trust and that we can go to, think about what those police officers go through in terms of being vetted as the right people for the job. And he said, what you should do is think about putting everything that you've ever posted online into a binder, and think about going into a job interview and then defending every single thing. Now, if you can imagine that, it kind of blew my mind when I thought about it. I don't have a very big online presence. I'm not a social media person, but you people live online. Think about every single thing that you ever put out there. Could you put it into a binder and then walk in and say, yeah, I'm proud of this? Well, you don't have to tell me yes or no, but maybe moving forward, think about it that way. And I have as my example on there, Jordan Binnington, St. Louis Blues last year. Yeah. Yeah, goaltender. So just before the playoffs, which they went quite a distance because they won, I found online that he was actually responding to, instead of talking about going into the playoffs, NHL playoffs for the very first time, he was actually talking about posts that he had done years before while he was still playing juniors. And he had written some offensive tweets and making a comment about a woman wearing a hijab, and making a comment about a cab driver speaking in a different language. And he had tweeted this stuff out, and that somebody had dug it up from years before. So here he is going into his first NHL playoffs, and instead of talking about hockey, he was defending these offensive tweets. It comes back, okay? So just be careful of it, okay? So that's it for me in terms of civility in the workplace. Any questions or comments on anything that you heard today? George or Shane?
I have a comment on number 9.
What was that?
So basically, like a week ago, I think I stayed extra after work. Like I was supposed to be off at 9:30, and I stayed till 10:30 to pull out everything and clean it.
Yes.
Our store manager asked the manager that was working to do it.
Yes.
And she's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll do it." So she acted like the next day when the general manager came in.
Yes.
She acted like she did all the work, but she was out back texting and FaceTiming.
Oh, that's a tough one. How did you handle it?
Well, I just basically was like, I'm the one who did it, and she's like, yeah, I know you are. She makes up stuff all the time. But like, it kind of made me upset, so I didn't really say much until like a couple days after, and then I just asked her if she knew who actually did the work, because I put a lot of like hard work into it. And
Sure.
I didn't like that she took credit or something. She didn't even.
Tough situation, because it's you want to be able to say, that was my work. That's where you can use those assertive I statements. I feel that, you need to have this information. You could have spoken to the person who took credit for your work and said, I wanted to talk to you about this situation because that's hard work that I did. And when that happened, I felt like this. Yeah, for sure.
I just didn't say it to the girl that took the credit because I didn't want anything to happen. So I just talked to the other manager instead, and she dealt with it.
Okay. Yeah, good. Yeah, that's a tough one. Somebody taking credit for your hard work. For sure. It's not a good feeling, is it? Yeah. Any other questions? Or?
I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Ms. Kraft, but do you know of limitations that employers should be putting on themselves with regard to hours for students?
I don't know. I know that an awful lot of our students work an awful lot of hours. And sometimes when I'm talking to someone who's struggling with regards to their grades, that sometimes, we kind of look at the big picture, and when they tell me they're working every night of the week, I mean, well, gosh, no wonder you're struggling. Who has time to get assignments done and work done? No, I'm not aware of a limitation of hours for part-time work. That would be something, and there's those I statements again. That's going in to talk to your employer and saying, this is what I need. I need, less hours, that I'm struggling at school and I need this. And maybe you have to make the decision, is it something you have to be doing, or can you be looking for a different part-time employment that perhaps will be a few less hours? I know an awful lot of students struggle with that. Yeah, it's constant. Any other questions, comments? Cameron?
Not really a question, but I just want to thank you for coming and doing this for us.
Thank you, Cameron. Appreciate it. And it's nice to meet all of you.
Thank you very
My
much.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.